Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, just last week testified before the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection for her part in this, which is really, honestly, kind of a whole other story here going on. Not exactly related to this, but just so happens. I mean, does that add a complexity here? Is there potential that we could see Justice Thomas recuse himself or anything like that? Do you see that at all being an issue?
It will be an issue. I don't think Justice Thomas recuses himself. And by the way, when a Supreme Court justice refuses to do so, there's really no comeback.
Right.
You can't really appeal that. So Supreme Court justice can decide to stay in the case irrespective of whatever activism his wife is involved in. But watch this space, because Ginny Thomas's activism is going to continue to be a bit of a problem for the Supreme Court justice. Maybe not in this particular instance, because folks should know that when you appeal to the Supreme Court, a lot of it has to do with geography. If you're, for example, up around us in the Philadelphia area, you would get Justice Alito. If you're down in Florida, you get Clarence Thomas. A lot of it's geographic. And by the way, that might have factored into the decision to file that case in Florida the way they did. It always factors into the decision if you're looking to go to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And Danny, super briefly, we know the court has a 6-3 conservative majority. How might that impact the outcome, if at all? What do you expect of the outcome?
The 11th Circuit put together a very reasoned opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if this is, other than Justice Thomas being the lone dissenter, I wouldn't be surprised if every other justice decides to leave the 11th Circuit opinion in place. Well-reasoned. They covered the law. They covered all the bases. That's my prediction. My predictions are usually wrong.
Time will tell.
That's not true. We've had a lot of offline conversations.
Don't bet on the Super Bowl with me. I promise you'll lose.
Danny Savalos, thank you so much. We love when you're here.
Always humble, always keeping us informed. And turning now to the controversy surrounding Georgia's Republican candidate for Senate, Herschel Walker. The former football star's campaign has been rocked by a report that Walker, an anti-abortion candidate, paid for an abortion for a former girlfriend in 2009. It's a claim he says is a flat-out lie. NBC News chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker joins us now for more. Kristen, good morning.
Hi, Zinkley. Good morning to you. Well, campaigns always brace for the possibility of an October surprise. Well, here it is in the critical Senate race in Georgia with that new controversy surrounding Republican Herschel Walker. Now, GOP sources are telling NBC News that leading senators are preparing to stand shoulder to shoulder with him on the airwaves and the campaign trail. But the question, will it be enough with just 5 weeks until the midterms?
Welcome to Herschel Walker!
This morning, Republicans are closing ranks around former football star Herschel Walker, their embattled Senate nominee in Georgia, a swing state that's critical to Republicans' fight to win control of the Senate. After the Daily Beast reported Walker in 2009 urged a then-girlfriend to get an abortion after he got her pregnant, then reimbursed her for the procedure and sent her a get-well card. Walker, who says he wants to ban abortion after 15 weeks without exceptions, is denying the allegation.
It is a flat-out lie. I can tell you right now, I never asked anyone to get an abortion. I never paid for an abortion.
The Daily Beast says the woman asked not to be identified, citing privacy concerns, adding she backed up her story by providing the Get Well card from Walker, an abortion clinic receipt, and a bank receipt with an image of a $700 check signed by Walker. NBC News has not independently verified the documents.
Everything has been a lie.
Walker is also facing fierce criticism from his own son, Christian, a budding conservative influencer who says the family urged him not to run, quote, because we all knew some of his past.
Family values people. He has 4 kids, 4 different women, wasn't in the house raising one of them. He was out having sex with other women. Do you care about family values?
Herschel Walker later tweeting, I love my son, no matter what. Walker is locked in a tight race with incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, who won a special election by just 2 percentage points last year. Many Republicans are rushing to Walker's defense, led by former President Trump, who's endorsed him, now saying Walker is being slandered and maligned by Democrats. It's not the first controversy to rock his campaign. He's falsely claimed he was a member of law enforcement and acknowledged fathering 3 children out of wedlock. Walker's ex-wife has accused him of holding a gun to her head and threatening to kill her, an incident Walker has blamed on his struggle with mental health. Now, incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock is not directly responding to the controversy. Instead, he's stressing his longstanding support for abortion rights. So the question, will all of this make a difference? It's just too soon to tell, but in close races like this one, even a few votes in either direction could have an impact. Sinclair.
Every vote matters. Herschel Walker, thank you so much. And this morning, there are new developments in the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has formally rubber-stamped the annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions.
The Russian forces are far from being fully in control of those areas amid a rapid push by Ukrainian troops. President Zelensky says his forces have now reclaimed dozens of towns. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has the latest.
As the United States announces more military aid for Ukraine, President Zelensky is saying it's only a matter of time before the Russians are pushed out of this country. In village after village, the Ukrainian flag hoisted high. Residents relieved to sing their national anthem.
Слава Україні! Героям слава! Слава Україні!
The United States announcing another $625 million package of military aid for Ukraine. This morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin formally annexing 4 Ukrainian territories. Though Russia does not even firmly control all of that land. Overnight, President Zelensky declaring dozens of settlements liberated in the south and the east. This week alone. Our soldiers are not stopping, he says, as the Kremlin scrambles troops to reinforce the front lines, with tens of thousands of Russian men dodging the draft. On Monday, Russia's defense minister said they managed to call up 200,000 for service, with training underway. I would rather stay home, this Russian draftee says, but if needed, it is needed. A far cry from Ukrainian conviction. Near the recently liberated town of Liman, Ukrainian troops cart away ammunition and armored vehicles, abandoned as Moscow's forces fled. We fight for our land, for our children, this serviceman says, adding all this comes at a very high price. It's a price being paid daily by ordinary Ukrainians. Mykolai Bondarenko and Oleksandr Klitschnik were traveling in a convoy of civilians trying to escape Russian-occupied Kupiansk when they say they came under fire. 24 people were killed, including a pregnant woman. Oleksandr was seriously wounded. I lost consciousness and was woken up by the screaming of children, he says. Mykolai was shot in the leg trying to escape. He says his son died while driving the lead car. His head fell on the steering wheel of the car, he says, but he managed to press the brake and stop the vehicle. Because your son was able to hit that brake, he was a hero. Yes. What else is there to say? Overnight, in a first for the Kyiv region, according to Ukrainian officials, Iranian-supplied kamikaze drones struck a number of critical infrastructure targets, setting buildings on fire and injuring one. Back to you.
Aaron, thank you so much.
And coming up on Morning News Now, firing back.
The U.S. and South Korea team up launching missiles in response to North Korea's recent missile activity. What this all means for escalating tensions in the region. Next.
NBC News, streaming free now.
You get one beautiful life to live. What are you going to do?
This show is so fun, but having you as a positive force means really the world to me.
Jenna doesn't stop till it's sold, okay?
We have this circle of women that love each other.
I decided I'm going to go with the rhythm of life.
And you love riding the wave.
This is a moment we're in right now. This is really electric.
Yeah.
I love you too.
NBC News, streaming free now.
I think when you open your eyes, you get to decide, how's my day going to be? We want to be a way to start your day, lighten your load, every single morning.
News is happening now.
Look at what's making headlines around the world.
Right now on Morning News Now.
We're coming on the air with breaking news.
And this is a significant moment.
Whenever it happens, wherever you are, NBC News, streaming free now.
As we look out over the latest city-turned-crime scene, we see the things left behind. Can you tell us what it was like? Our NBC News exclusive.
Hey, I'm Hallie. It's good to be with you tonight. There's another legal filing today, and I want to cut through some of the weedsy stuff. And let's just get to the point. They have started to vote on the PACT Act. If you're like, Hallie, stop speaking Washingtonese. This bill would basically give health care to veterans who have exposed to these toxic chemicals. So, Scott, I'm trying to make this as not DC as possible. The increased sort of anger that we've seen now in politics. I saw you searching for, I think, your microphone, Danny. You are
I was trying to do it on the slide.
Live TV, man. It's okay.
Live from Ukraine, from Uvalde, Texas, from Mayfield, Kentucky. To cover the news, you have to be in it. This is how so many towns and cities are protecting themselves. You can actually see they're pushing the gates open. Was there a school officer on campus? That's what we've been told. No. Do you remember any tornado as bad as this one? You look at this and you're thinking, we're not going to have power for weeks, if not months. Exactly. Every night, it's your news playlist.
Top Story with Tom Llamas, weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
We're back now with the latest on escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula after North Korea shot a missile over Japan.
That's right. The launch was its longest ever weapons test of a missile that could reach the U.S. Pacific territory of Guam and beyond. In response, the U.S. and South Korea fired tactical missiles in the Sea of Japan. President Biden also spoke with the Japanese Prime Minister and reinforced America's commitment to that country's defense. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer joins us now from Beijing with the latest. Janice?
Good morning. This missile launch has raised the stakes in the region. Kim Jong-un hasn't said anything about it yet, but the sense is that by launching it over Japan, he wanted to make a political point. And with the military response we've seen so far from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan, it seems he got their attention.
This morning, the U.S. and South Korea firing back with 4 surface-to-surface missiles targeting the sea. When one of them failed and caught fire, a South Korean town thought it was under attack. The region now on edge over North Korea's latest missile test that prompted bombing drills, fighter jets, and warnings.
The United States condemns these actions and calls on the DPRK to refrain from further unlawful and destabilizing acts.
The missile launched by North Korea near its border with China was its longest range test yet, soaring a record 2,800 miles clear over Japan, then crashing into the Pacific Ocean, triggering warnings for millions along Japan's northern coast to take cover. Japan's prime minister calling it an outrageous act. Analysts believe the missile fired was the massive Hwasong-12 that was paraded through Pyongyang earlier this year and is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. By far the most provocative launch in a record year for North Korea, most of the tests didn't get much attention from the U.S. But looming now, a possible nuclear test, something Kim Jong-un hasn't done since 2017, but appears to be preparing for.
We would urge him to be willing to sit down and have those discussions so that this doesn't have to come to blows.
With relations at a low and talks long stalled, a familiar tension has returned over North Korea's next move.
The U.S. and other countries are pushing for a UN Security Council meeting, but China and Russia are opposed to any open discussion about North Korea. And it's also worth noting that shortly after that missile was fired, Pyongyang voiced support for the Kremlin's annexation of those 4 territories in Ukraine. So the regional dynamics definitely shifting here, and many would say dangerously so.
Janice Mackey-Frayer with those important updates. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And turning to China now, where next week the country's Communist Party is expected to hand the president an unprecedented third term as leader.
President Xi has abolished term limits and is already the most powerful Chinese leader since Chairman Mao. And nowhere is his growing strength being watched more closely than in Taiwan. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez visited the island recently and joins us now in person. It's so good to see you.
So good to see you. We normally do this from 7 time zones away.
Yeah.
Yes. So here's the deal. Chinese leaders have been making threats against Taiwan for decades now. But people we spoke to on the island, both government officials and just ordinary people on the street, say Xi Jinping is different. This is a man who has accumulated an enormous amount of political power. He has very few guardrails, and he really sees it as his destiny to be the Chinese leader who takes back Taiwan. What's also different is that in Joe Biden, you have a U.S. president who is saying explicitly for the first time he is prepared to send the U.S. military to defend Taiwan, even if that means war with China. In his first 10 years in power, Xi Jinping has presided over a vast buildup of China's military might. Now, on the cusp of a third term, Xi has pledged to fulfill what he calls the historic mission of China's Communist Party, taking control of Taiwan by force if necessary. Taiwan's foreign minister tells NBC News it's a threat they cannot ignore.
The threat is there. The threat is real, even though we don't know when China is going to launch a military attack against Taiwan, but we have to be very realistically prepared for it.
Xi Jinping looks set to get an unprecedented third term as China's leader. Do you believe that will embolden him to move against Taiwan?
That is one factor that we need to look at it very seriously.
President Biden breaking with decades of precedent by saying he'd order the U.S. military to fight against a Chinese invasion.
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
Honoring that pledge could mean all-out war between the U.S. and China. Like Ukraine, the U.S. has supplied Taiwan with billions of dollars in advanced weaponry. But unlike Ukraine, Taiwan is an island, and it may be impossible to resupply if war breaks out.
We are in the process of engaging in very serious discussions with our good friend, the United States, to see how we can accumulate enough stockpile for us to fight a war if the war has to happen.
So you need materials in place before the shooting starts?
We need the material in place, and we need high-tech weaponry.
To see the threat for ourselves, we traveled to the place a Chinese invasion would likely begin, the Taiwanese island of Kinmen, just 6 miles off the mainland. So close you can see skyscrapers from the Chinese city of Xiamen looming in the distance. These spikes are meant to stop Chinese forces from landing on this beach, but they're old, and really, if they're ever put to the test, it's a sign that Taiwan and possibly the U.S. are already at war with China. For now, Taiwanese troops on Kinmen tested and taunted by what they say are Chinese civilian drones overhead. This video of Taiwanese troops throwing rocks was mockingly shared on Chinese social media. China's foreign ministry did not deny Chinese drones were flying in the area. Back in Taipei, these volunteers are preparing for the worst. Dozens of young civilians learning the skills they'd need to support their people during an invasion.
National survival is the biggest challenge of our generation.
After decades of military rule, Taiwan today is considered one of the free